The glow from my phone screen cut through the darkness of our bedroom like a blade. 3:17 a.m., and sleep had abandoned me hours ago. Livia lay beside me, her breathing steady and peaceful, one arm draped across the pillow where her phone used to charge every night. Used to, because 3 days ago she'd come home with a story about tripping at Trader Joe's and shattering her screen beyond repair. Such a mess, she'd said, dumping the pieces on our kitchen counter with theatrical frustration. The whole thing just exploded when it hit the concrete. I'd been the dutiful husband, of course. Drove straight to the store, bought her the newest model, even transferred her number while she soaked in a bubble bath. She'd thanked me with one of those bright smiles that used to make my chest tight with affection. Now it just made me wonder what she was hiding. Call it instinct, call it paranoia, call it whatever you want, but something about her story felt rehearsed. Too clean, too convenient. Livia had always been careful with her things, almost obsessively so. The woman who spent 20 minutes organizing her purse every morning doesn't just fumble her phone onto concrete. That's when I remembered the Find My Device feature. My thumb hovered over the app icon. We'd set up family sharing years ago when Sydney was still in high school, back when keeping track of everyone felt like responsible parenting instead of surveillance. The account was still linked to Livia's old device, assuming any part of it still functioned. I tapped the screen. The map loaded slowly, that familiar blue dot pulsing in the center. But it wasn't pulsing at our house. It wasn't even pulsing in our neighborhood. The dot sat stationary on Maple Street, about 15 minutes across town. The address read 847 Maple Street, and I'd never seen it before in my life. I knew every street in this city, 23 years in real estate development, and I'd walked, driven, or built on nearly every block. Maple Street was older residential, the kind of tree-lined avenue where young professionals bought their first houses and stayed for decades. Nice area, quiet. The sort of place where a broken phone might end up if someone wanted to keep it safe, or if someone wanted to keep it close. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stared at that unmoving dot. The timestamp showed the device had been at that location since Tuesday evening. The same Tuesday when Livia claimed to have destroyed it during her afternoon grocery run. Callum? Livia's voice drifted through the darkness, thick with sleep. You okay? You're breathing funny. I closed the app and set my phone aside. Just work stuff. Go back to sleep. She murmured something and rolled over, pulling the covers higher. Within minutes, her breathing had returned to that steady rhythm. But I lay there until dawn, staring at the ceiling and running through possibilities. Maybe she'd thrown the broken phone in someone's trash, and they'd kept it. Maybe she'd given it to a repair shop on Maple Street. Maybe there was some perfectly innocent explanation that would make me feel like a paranoid fool for even thinking what I was thinking. But maybe not. When morning came, I made coffee and waited for her to wake up. She appeared in the kitchen around 8, already dressed in her yoga clothes, hair pulled back in that effortless way that probably took her 20 minutes to perfect. Morning, babe. She kissed my cheek and reached for the coffee I'd poured for her. Thanks for getting up early. I've got that class at 9, then lunch with Vicky. Sounds nice. I kept my voice casual, conversational. Hey, did you ever figure out what to do with the broken phone? I was thinking we might be able to salvage some of the photos. She paused with the mug halfway to her lips. Just for a second, but long enough for me to notice. Oh, I tossed it in the dumpster behind the store. Figured there was no point keeping broken glass around. She shrugged and took a sip. The new one's working perfectly, though. You did good. Another lie. Clean and simple, delivered with the same bright smile she'd been giving me for weeks. I nodded and smiled back. Glad I could help. After she left for yoga, I sat in my kitchen and opened the Find My Device app again. The dot was still there, still motionless, at 847 Maple Street. Still very much not in a dumpster behind Trader Joe's. The drive to Maple Street took exactly 14 minutes. I'd timed it twice now, once during morning traffic, and once during the lunch rush. Both times, I'd parked across the street from 847 and studied the house like I was conducting a property assessment. It was a decent place. 2-story colonial, probably built in the 70s, with a well-maintained yard and fresh paint on the shutters. A black BMW sat in the driveway, and I could see workout equipment through the garage window. Someone with money lived here, but not old money. New money. The kind that came from commissions or bonuses rather than inheritance. The kind that might appeal to my wife. I'd been married to Livia for 8 years, long enough to recognize her patterns. She'd grown up without much, and while she claimed to love our comfortable middle-class life, I'd noticed her lingering looks at luxury cars and designer handbags. She followed influencers who vacationed in places we couldn't afford and bought products we didn't need. Just dreaming, she'd say when I caught her scrolling through lifestyle blogs. Nothing wrong with a little inspiration. But inspiration had a way of becoming aspiration, and aspiration had a way of becoming action. I was still sitting in my truck, watching the house, when the front door opened. A man emerged, tall and athletic, wearing the kind of casual clothes that cost more than most people's work wardrobe. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no, never been denied anything he wanted. He walked to the BMW, and as he backed out of the driveway, I got a clear look at his face. Mid-30s, strong jawline, the kind of symmetrical features that photographed well. I didn't recognize him, but something about his bearing suggested he was exactly the type of man Livia might notice, the type she might find inspiring. I followed him at a distance, curious about where he might be going at 2:30 on a Wednesday afternoon. He drove to the downtown business district and parked outside a sleek glass building that housed several financial firms. A small placard by the entrance listed the tenants: investment advisors, wealth management companies, insurance brokers. So he had money and worked with money. Perfect. When I got home, I found Livia in the kitchen, preparing what looked like an elaborate dinner. She'd changed out of her yoga clothes into a dress I'd never seen before, something that hugged her curves and made her look younger than her 31 years. Special occasion? I asked, loosening my tie. Can a wife cook for her husband without an ulterior motive? She laughed, but there was something forced about it. I just felt like making something nice. It smells amazing. I moved behind her and wrapped my arms around her waist, feeling her tense slightly at the contact. How was lunch with Vicky? Oh, you know Vicky, full of drama and gossip as usual. She leaned into me, but it felt performative rather than natural. She's having issues with her boyfriend again. The same issues or new ones? Same ones. Different day. Livia turned in my arms and smiled up at me. I told her she should just be honest with him about what she wants. Communication is everything in a relationship, don't you think? The irony was so thick I could taste it. Absolutely, I said. Honesty is the foundation of everything. That night, after dinner and wine and conversation that felt like we were both reading from scripts, I waited until Livia was asleep before checking the app again. The dot had moved. Not far, just a few blocks over to what looked like a restaurant district. It had been there for about 2 hours before returning to 847 Maple Street. Someone was definitely using her old phone. Someone who lived on Maple Street and worked downtown and took her broken device out for dinner. I screenshot the location data and saved it to a folder I labeled Property Research. Then I started planning my next move. Jonas Pritchard had been my best friend since college, and in the 25 years since graduation, he'd developed into exactly the kind of person you wanted on your side during a crisis. After a decade as a city police detective, he'd retired early and now worked security for a downtown hotel, which meant he had access to resources and knowledge that most civilians didn't. It also meant he knew how to ask the right questions without judgment. So let me get this straight, he said, leaning back in his chair at the lantern, our usual Thursday night spot. Your wife's phone is supposedly destroyed, but it's pinging at some guy's house across town. And you want to know what that means? I want to know what my options are, I corrected. Legally speaking. Jonas took a long pull from his beer and studied me with those cop eyes that had probably made 1,000 suspects confess. Legally speaking, if the device is still linked to your family account, you have every right to track it. What you do with that information is where things get complicated. How complicated? Depends on what you find and how you find it. He set down his beer and leaned forward. But before we talk about legalities, let's talk about reality. How sure are you that this is what you think it is? I'd been asking myself the same question for 3 days. Pretty sure. Pretty sure isn't sure enough for what you're thinking about doing. His voice dropped to the tone he'd probably used with witnesses. You need to be certain, Callum, because once you start down this road, there's no going back to ignorant bliss. He was right, of course, but ignorant bliss was already gone, replaced by sleepless nights and constant suspicion. Every smile from Livia felt calculated. Every casual comment about her day felt scripted. Every kiss goodnight felt like betrayal. I need to know, I said. Jonas nodded slowly. Then let's figure out how to know for sure. The next morning, while Livia was at her Pilates class, I accessed our phone account online. Jonas had walked me through the process, explaining what I could legally review and what I couldn't. Call logs were fair game, as were text message timestamps and data usage patterns. What I found made my stomach clench. For the past 6 weeks, there had been a secondary pattern in Livia's phone usage, clusters of activity that didn't match her stated schedule. Long calls during times when she claimed to be in yoga or shopping or having lunch with friends. Text conversations that showed heavy back-and-forth exchanges, the kind that suggested intimate conversation rather than casual communication. The number appeared frequently enough to have a contact name, but when I cross-referenced it with her current phone, it wasn't there. She'd deleted it after transferring everything to the new device, but phone companies keep records. Jonas met me for lunch and reviewed the data I'd printed. His expression grew more serious as he scanned the pages. This is pretty damning, he said finally. The pattern is clear, and the timing matches up with when you said her behavior started changing. So what do I do with it? That depends on what you want to accomplish. He set the papers aside and looked at me directly. Do you want to save your marriage or end it? The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on confirming my suspicions that I hadn't really considered what came next. I want the truth, I said. The truth is right here. He tapped the call logs. Your wife is having an affair with someone who lives at 847 Maple Street. The question is what you plan to do about it. That evening, I watched Livia get ready for what she claimed was a book club meeting. She spent 45 minutes on her hair and makeup, changed clothes 3 times, and sprayed herself with perfume I'd never smelled before. New fragrance? I asked casually. Vicky recommended it. She didn't meet my eyes. Said it was more sophisticated than my usual. It's nice. Very sophisticated. She kissed my cheek, careful not to disturb her lipstick, and told me not to wait up. The book discussion might run late. After she left, I opened the Find My Device app. Within 20 minutes, the dot was moving toward Maple Street. By 8:15, it was stationary at 8:47. Book club was apparently a very small gathering. I spent the weekend conducting what Jonas called reconnaissance. While Livia attended her various classes and social commitments, I learned everything I could about the man at 847 Maple Street. His name was Derek Mitchell, and he worked as an investment advisor for Hartwell Financial downtown. 34 years old, divorced 2 years ago, no children. He drove the BMW, owned his house outright, and according to social media, enjoyed CrossFit, craft cocktails, and weekend trips to places like Napa Valley and Martha's Vineyard. He was also incredibly careless about his privacy settings. His Instagram account showed a lifestyle that was clearly designed to impress: expensive restaurants, luxury hotels, photos from exclusive events, the kind of curated existence that would appeal to someone who felt trapped in suburban routine. Someone like my wife. What made it worse was seeing how perfectly she fit into his world. In the background of several recent photos, I could make out details that confirmed what I already knew. A woman's jacket draped over a chair that looked exactly like one Livia owned. Wine glasses positioned for two people when Derek claimed to be dining alone. Small things that might mean nothing to a casual observer, but painted a clear picture for someone who knew what to look for. The final confirmation came on Sunday evening. Livia announced that she needed to run to the store for groceries, but when I checked the app, her phone went straight to Maple Street. She returned 3 hours later with a single bag containing items we already had in the pantry. Traffic was terrible, she explained, avoiding eye contact, and I ran into Janet from yoga. We ended up talking for ages. I nodded and helped her put away the unnecessary groceries, each item feeling like another small betrayal. That night, I made a decision. Monday morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Derek Mitchell's office building. I waited in the lobby until he arrived, then followed him to the elevator. Derek Mitchell? I extended my hand as the doors closed. Callum Torvin, I think we need to talk. His face went pale, but to his credit, he didn't try to deny knowing who I was. Look, Mr. Torvin, I think there might be some misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. I kept my voice calm, professional. I know about you and my wife. I know about the phone, the meetings, all of it. What I don't know is what you plan to do about it. The elevator reached his floor, but neither of us moved to get off. What do you want? He asked finally. I want you to end it, today, completely. He straightened, and I could see him trying to decide whether to be defensive or aggressive. And if I don't? Then I stopped being reasonable about this situation. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped out with him. His office was exactly what I'd expected. Glass and chrome and expensive furniture designed to impress clients. The kind of place where someone might feel very important and very powerful. You can't threaten me, Derek said, closing the door behind us. I'm not threatening you. I'm informing you. I sat down in one of his client chairs without being invited. I'm a real estate developer, Derek. I've been working in this city for over 20 years. I know people. I know which permits get approved and which ones get delayed. I know which inspectors are thorough and which ones are flexible. I know which contractors do quality work and which ones cut corners. His jaw tightened. What's your point? My point is that your little investment firm operates in a very small community. Reputation matters, client trust matters, and right now, I'm the only one who knows you're the kind of man who pursues married women. Livia pursued me just as much. I don't care who pursued whom. I stood up, straightening my jacket. I care about ending this situation before it gets more complicated for everyone involved. Derek moved behind his desk, putting the furniture between us like a barrier. And if I agree to your demands, then this conversation never happened, and we all move on with our lives. And if I don't? I smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. Then you discover just how small this city really is. Derek Mitchell turned out to be exactly the kind of man I'd expected him to be. Selfish, cowardly, and completely unwilling to face consequences for his actions. Instead of ending things with Livia, he told her about our conversation. I knew this because she came home that evening in a fury unlike anything I'd seen in our 8 years of marriage. She slammed the front door hard enough to rattle the windows and stormed into the living room where I was reading. How dare you, she said, her voice shaking with rage. How dare you threaten Derek? I set down my book and looked at her calmly. I'm not sure what you mean. Don't you dare lie to me. He told me everything, about you showing up at his office, making threats, trying to intimidate him. Interesting. I leaned back in my chair. And what exactly is your relationship with Derek that would make my conversation with him any of your business? The question caught her off guard. I could see her realizing that she'd just confirmed everything I'd suspected. We're friends. she said weakly. Friends. I nodded slowly. The kind of friends who discuss their personal business meetings? The kind of friends who share details about their private conversations? She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. Or maybe, I continued, the kind of friends who spend 3 evenings a week at each other's houses? The kind who go out to dinner together while claiming to be at book club? I don't know what you think you know. I know everything, Livia. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, returning with a folder I'd prepared for exactly this moment. I know about the phone that was never broken. I know about the calls and the text messages. I know about every lie you've told me for the past 2 months. I set the folder on the coffee table between us and opened it to reveal printed call logs, location data, and screenshots from Derek's social media accounts. I know about the wine glasses in his dining room photos and the jacket that looks exactly like the one you bought last month. I know about the restaurant you went to last Tuesday when you claimed to be having lunch with Vicky. Livia stared at the papers, her face cycling through shock, fear, and finally, defiance. So what? She said, lifting her chin. So what if I found someone who appreciates me? Someone who doesn't take me for granted? Take you for granted? The accusation hit harder than I'd expected. How exactly have I taken you for granted? You work all the time. You never want to go anywhere or do anything interesting. You're content with this boring, predictable life, and you expect me to be content with it too. So you decided to find excitement elsewhere. I decided to find happiness elsewhere. Her voice was getting stronger, more confident. Derek makes me feel alive again. He makes me feel beautiful and interesting and worth pursuing. And lying to me about it? That made you feel alive too? She had the grace to look ashamed, but only for a moment. I didn't want to hurt you, she said. I was trying to figure out what I wanted before I made any big decisions. What you wanted. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. And what do you want, Livia? She straightened her shoulders and looked me directly in the eyes. I want a divorce. The next few weeks passed in a blur of lawyers and paperwork and conversations that felt like negotiations between hostile countries. Livia moved out of our house and into Derek's place on Maple Street, making their relationship public in the way that people do when they want to control the narrative. She told everyone who would listen that our marriage had been over for years, that we'd grown apart naturally, that the divorce was mutual and amicable. She painted herself as a woman who'd finally found the courage to pursue happiness after settling for mediocrity. Derek, meanwhile, played the role of the supportive new boyfriend who'd rescued her from an unfulfilling situation. He posted photos of them at expensive restaurants and weekend getaways, each image carefully crafted to show how much better her life was now. It might have worked if they hadn't made one crucial mistake. They underestimated me. The thing about working in real estate development for over 20 years is that you learn patience. You learn that the biggest, most satisfying victories often take time to develop. You learn to think several moves ahead, to anticipate problems before they arise, and to always have a backup plan. Most importantly, you learn that information is power, and timing is everything. I'd been gathering information since the day I discovered Livia's phone at Derek's house. Not just about their affair, but about their lives, their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities. I knew about Derek's previous divorce and the financial settlement that had left him cash poor despite his expensive lifestyle. I knew about his client base and his professional reputation and the precarious nature of his business model. I knew about Livia's social media presence and her growing obsession with projecting an image of success and sophistication. I knew about her credit card debt and her student loans and her complete financial dependence on first me, then Derek. And I knew that neither of them had considered the long-term consequences of their actions. The first crack in their perfect new life appeared 3 months after Livia moved out. Derek's ex-wife, apparently inspired by his sudden public relationship, decided to revisit their divorce settlement. She hired an aggressive attorney and began questioning whether Derek had fully disclosed his assets during their proceedings. The investigation that followed revealed several questionable financial practices at Derek's firm, including some creative accounting that skirted the edge of legality. Nothing criminal, but enough to concern his business partners and several major clients. I had nothing to do with his ex-wife's decision to reopen their case, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't pleased by the timing. The second crack appeared when Livia discovered that Derek's expensive lifestyle was largely funded by credit and investment returns that were far from guaranteed. The house on Maple Street had a substantial mortgage, the BMW was leased, and the luxury vacations were financed through a combination of business expenses and borrowed money. She'd left a stable, comfortable life for what turned out to be an elaborate performance of success. But the final crack, the one that brought their whole carefully constructed world crashing down, was entirely my doing. The opportunity came 6 months after our divorce was finalized. Derek's firm was hosting their annual client appreciation event at the city's most exclusive country club, and according to social media, he and Livia would be attending together. It was exactly the kind of high-profile social gathering where reputation mattered, where impressions were formed, and business relationships were built or destroyed. The kind of event where a well-timed revelation could have maximum impact. I'd been planning for this moment since the day Livia walked out of our house. The guest list included most of Derek's current clients, several potential new ones, and a significant number of influential people in the local business community, people who valued discretion, stability, and trustworthiness in their financial advisors, people who might be very interested to learn about Derek's pattern of questionable decision-making. I didn't attend the event myself. Instead, I arranged for the information to be delivered by someone who could present it more effectively than I ever could. Derek's ex-wife had become quite motivated to share details about her former husband's character, particularly after discovering the extent of his financial deceptions during their marriage. She had documentation of his affairs, his lies, his manipulative behavior, and his complete disregard for the commitments he made. She also had photographs and correspondence that painted a very unflattering picture of the kind of man Derek Mitchell really was. When she stood up during the dinner portion of the event and asked to address the gathering, everyone assumed she was there to offer congratulations or share fond memories. The country club's dining room fell silent as she walked to the microphone. What followed was a methodical, devastating presentation of Derek's true character. She spoke calmly and professionally, presenting evidence of his deceptions with the precision of a prosecutor making a closing argument. She talked about the affairs that had destroyed their marriage, including his pattern of pursuing vulnerable women who were already in committed relationships. She shared financial records that showed his willingness to lie and manipulate for personal gain. She presented correspondence that revealed his complete lack of integrity in both personal and professional matters. And she introduced Derek's current girlfriend, Livia, as simply the latest in a long line of married women he'd convinced to abandon their families for promises he had no intention of keeping. The room was absolutely silent when she finished speaking. Derek tried to respond, tried to defend himself, but the damage was complete. Several clients left immediately. Others made it clear that they would be transferring their accounts elsewhere. The managing partners of his firm huddled in urgent conversation while Derek and Livia sat frozen at their table. By the end of the evening, Derek Mitchell's career was effectively over. But I wasn't finished yet. The beauty of a well-executed plan is that once it's set in motion, it develops its own momentum. Derek's professional destruction created a cascade of consequences that I couldn't have orchestrated if I'd tried. His firm terminated his partnership within a week of the country club incident. Without his income, he couldn't maintain the mortgage on the Maple Street house or the lease on the BMW. His expensive lifestyle collapsed like a house of cards, taking Livia's dreams of sophisticated living down with it. She tried to salvage the relationship at first, probably hoping that Derek would find another position and restore their comfortable arrangement. But Derek without money was a very different person than Derek with money. The charm disappeared, replaced by bitterness and blame. The romantic gestures stopped. The expensive dinners became fast food eaten in front of the television. Within 2 months, they were fighting constantly. Within 3 months, Derek was drinking heavily and spending his days playing online poker instead of looking for work. Within 4 months, Livia was sleeping on his couch because he'd converted the bedroom into what he called his office, but was really just a place to hide from his problems. She called me on a Thursday evening in November, 8 months after she'd walked out of our marriage. "Callum?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "Can we talk?" "We're talking now." "I mean in person. Please. I need to see you." I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory, where we could have a conversation without the weight of our shared history pressing down on us. She looked terrible. The confidence and vitality that had attracted me to her years ago were gone, replaced by exhaustion and what looked like genuine regret. "I made a mistake," she said without preamble. "A huge, terrible mistake." I sipped my coffee and waited for her to continue. "Derek isn't who I thought he was. None of this is what I thought it would be." She wrapped her hands around her cup like she was trying to absorb its warmth. "I threw away everything good in my life for a fantasy. What do you want me to say, Livia? I want you to say you forgive me. I want you to say we can try again." The request hung between us like a challenge. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She looked genuinely broken, genuinely remorseful. But then I remembered the lies, the months of deception, the casual cruelty of her betrayal, the way she'd rewritten our entire relationship to justify her actions. "No," I said simply. "Please, Callum, I know I hurt you, but we had something real. We can have it again." "We had something real," I agreed. "And you destroyed it. You didn't just make a mistake, Livia. You made a choice. You made dozens of choices, every day for months. You chose to lie to me. You chose to betray our marriage. You chose to leave. I was confused. You were selfish." I set down my cup and looked at her directly. "You wanted excitement and luxury and attention, and you were willing to sacrifice everything we'd built together to get it. But you realize now that Derek can't give you what you wanted, so you're here, hoping I'll take you back and restore the comfortable life you gave up." She started to cry then, quiet tears that might have moved me once upon a time. "I loved you," I said, "and I meant it. I would have done anything for you. But love isn't enough when it's not reciprocated. And trust, once it's broken, can't be repaired." I stood up to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I hope you figure out what actually makes you happy. But you're going to have to figure it out without me." I walked out of that coffee shop and never looked back. Livia and Derek's relationship limped along for another few months before finally collapsing under the weight of their mutual disappointment. She moved back in with her parents and eventually found work at a marketing firm in another city. Derek declared bankruptcy and left town entirely, though I heard he was working at a car dealership somewhere in Florida. As for me, I discovered that life after betrayal wasn't the wasteland I'd expected it to be. The house felt peaceful instead of empty. My work became satisfying again. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during the final years of my marriage. Jonas and I still meet at the Lantern every Thursday, though now we talk about future plans instead of past grievances. I've started dating again, carefully and selectively, with a much clearer understanding of what I'm looking for in a partner. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how I handled the situation with Livia and Derek. They suggest that I was vindictive, that I should have taken the high road and simply walked away. But I don't see it that way. I see it as justice. They made choices that hurt me deeply, and they faced the natural consequences of those choices. I didn't destroy Derek's career. I simply made sure that people knew who he really was. I didn't end their relationship. I just removed the financial foundation that was holding it together. The truth has a way of surfacing eventually. I just helped it along. And if that makes me vindictive, I can live with that. Because at the end of the day, I'm the one who gets to sleep peacefully at night, knowing that I never compromised my integrity or betrayed someone who trusted me. I'm the one who gets the last laugh. And that's exactly how it should be.